Simone Carter woke before sunrise, as she did every morning, and slipped quietly from her small apartment into the soft gray light of dawn. The air was cool against her skin, and she breathed deeply, savoring the scent of wet earth from the garden. Boxes she had planted behind her building. She knelt beside rows of tomato and pepper plants, her fingers gently probing the soil, making sure each stem was steady. Even after years of service far from home, caring for these simple green shoots grounded her in a way nothing else could. After her garden check, Simone walked the few blocks to the community center where she worked. Inside, she unlocked the heavy door and flicked on the lights. The waiting room glowed in soft yellow, and she arranged bright chairs in neat rows. She set out flyers for evening classes, filled paper cups with coffee, and straightened a shelf of donated books. Task felt like an act of kindness, small gestures that let people know someone cared. Children would scamper in later, and she would meet them with that warm smile that eased even the shyest newcomer into feeling at home. Neighbors called her Calm Simone, though few knew the truth of the strength she kept locked beneath. Her gentle manner. In high school, she had been quiet and small, but when she joined the army, she grew into someone people watched with respect. Stories of her time overseas were whispered, but never confirmed, and Simone preferred it that way. Her focus now was on reading homework problems to children, helping elderly residents fill out forms, and weaving bonds between families of every race and background in her Chicago neighborhood. One Saturday afternoon, Simone's routine shifted. She had just finished leading a basic self-defense class for teenage girls when her phone buzzed. The news alert was blunt. Arson suspected in local apartment fire. Simone's heart sank as she swallowed a gulp of coffee. She knew neighbors often complained about petty vandalism and shout-outs from gangs, but an actual fire was rare. She grabbed her jacket and hurried outside to see what she could do. Across the street, she found neighbors gathered in small clusters under the amber streetlights. A faint smell of smoke still lingered, though most of the flames had died down. Fire trucks and police cars lined the curb, their flashing lights painting the brick walls in red and blue. Simone slipped through the crowd toward the smoldering remains of her own home. Ash drifted through the air like fine snow, settling on broken glass and charred pieces of furniture. Her heart pounded as she took in the sight. The front half of her living room was gone, windows blown out, walls blackened by soot. The kitchen looked like a ruined shell. She stared at the ruin of her favorite armchair, the one where she always sat reading letters from old army friends. A thick lump formed in her throat as she realized how little she had been able to save. Her keys, her phone, her few keepsakes, they were buried somewhere in that wreckage. She looked down at her hands, trembling. A firefighter noticed her and gently guided her back behind the police tape. Simone did not argue. She knew it was for her safety. She watched as the crew sprayed water into the basement, where the fire had most likely started. No one had been hurt, thank God, but someone had set the blaze on purpose. Rumors swirled in broken bits of conversation. Someone muttered about a racist gang nearby, a group known for slurs and threats. Simone kept silent, her mind clicking into calm focus. She needed facts, not gossip. She closed her eyes and remembered drills from years before. Stay low, avoid smoke, find the exit. Instinct told her that fear was a tool, but anger could be a weapon if left unchecked. She forced her pulse to slow and looked at the faces in. The crowd, some were shocked, some were curious, some clearly looked for a chance to blame. She wondered who would do such a thing to someone they barely knew. She wondered what they would do if they knew who she really was. For now, she let the city's emergency services do their job. Police took her statement. She had no idea why anyone would target her. She spoke in calm, even tones, describing the days before the fire. The odd phone call, with no one on the other end, the spray-painted racial slur that had appeared on her mailbox 2 nights before. Every word was clear, precise. The officers scribbled in their notebooks, nodding as she spoke. She gave them a list of friends and neighbors they might question, and she agreed to contact them if she remembered anything more. As night fell, Simone found herself back at the community center, where a small group of volunteers gathered to plan relief for those displaced by the fire. Most had lost all their belongings, clothes, photos, even family heirlooms. Simone helped sort donations, blankets, canned goods, winter coats. Standing beside her was Mrs. Delgado from the third floor, who wept quietly as she held a purse full of old photographs. Simone offered a soft word, a tissue, and let her cry it out. She thought of what she would have done if she had pictures in that building, if the flames had taken away every token of her past. At home that evening, while her temporary room in a friend's spare bedroom, Simone sat on the edge of the bed and let her suitcases thud open on the floor. She pulled out a framed photo of her mother, smiled faintly, and placed it gently on the nightstand. Then she wrapped herself in a warm blanket and stared at the wall until sleep finally came, her mind drifting between dreams of flames and green shoots in her garden. The next morning, Simone returned to the charred lot. It rained overnight, and tiny rivulets of water snaked through the ashes. She crouched down and pressed her fingers into the muddy earth, noting how the ground still held warmth beneath the cool rain. She picked up a scorched piece of metal. Her old mailbox post stand stood it aside. Even in ruin, she recognized shapes of resilience. Life would grow again here, one way or another. Volunteers arrived with cleaning supplies and paint. Simone handed out masks and gloves, instructing people on safety before they began scrubbing walls and clearing debris. Conversation buzzed around her plans to build a small park, hopes to attract a nonprofit to help rebuild, dreams of a mural to cover the blackened bricks. Simone felt a spark of energy she had not expected. She was tired, yes, but she refused to let this act of hatred define her or her community. As she worked, she noticed a man in a uniform approach, one of the firefighters from the night before. He offered her a bottled water and said quietly, "You handled yourself well. Have you ever served?" Simone paused, surprised. She shook her head no, as she had done so many times before, until she felt strange denying it to someone who already knew. Then she met his eyes and said, "Yes." He nodded and walked away without another word, but the look of respect he gave her as he left was enough to fill her with a quiet pride. The rest of the day was a blur of sweat, paintbrushes, and laughter as neighbors turned what had started as a tragedy into a chance to come together. Simone stood back at one point and watched a young boy splash paint on a wall, his face bright with concentration. She imagined this street, once blackened by hate, someday full of color and life. It would take time, but Simone knew that, just like her tomato plants, something good could grow from even the harshest of beginnings. By evening, the walls were scrubbed clean, and fresh coats of paint gleamed under the streetlights. Simone walked home, her boots leaving wet footprints on the sidewalk. She passed an overturned chair from her old living room, now battered but still there, waiting to be restored. She smiled to herself, thinking how even the most broken things could be mended with patience and care. Back in her friend's spare room, Simone lay wide awake for a long time, listening to the quiet hum of the city. She thought about the gang who started the fire, about the fear they had tried to spread. She thought about what they would do if they ever learned that the quiet black woman they targeted was once a Delta Force operator. For now, she tucked that secret away and focused on what truly mattered: healing, rebuilding, and standing strong. With her neighbors, the road ahead would not be easy. But Simone Carter was no stranger to hard work. And she knew in her bones that one day soon, this block would feel like home again. Simone woke early again, though her body ached from the day's hard work. Her muscles felt stiff, but her mind was alive with purpose. She stepped into the gray morning light and walked down the street toward the firehouse. The day before, she had briefly met one of the firefighters who recognized something in her calm strength. Today, she planned to talk with the chief and offer any information she could. Inside the firehouse, the air smelled of soot and coffee. Firefighters moved through the bays, tending to hoses and cleaning gear. Simone found Chief Ramirez leaning against a truck, studying the damaged photos on his tablet. He looked up, surprise flickering in his eyes when he saw her. "Morning, Ms. Carter," he said, nodding. "Thanks for coming by." She offered a small smile. "I wanted to see if you needed anything else from me. I want to help however I can." Chief Ramirez slipped the tablet into his pocket. "We've got statements, photos, investigators, but you handled yourself well under pressure, Few civilians stay so calm. Simone met his gaze evenly. I learned to stay calm when things get serious. For a moment, he studied her. Then he spoke carefully. Some of us in the service notice things. You served, didn't you? Simone felt her heart skip. She had kept that part of her life hidden. Outside, the world saw only the gentlewoman, who planted tomatoes and led self-defense classes. But here Chief Ramirez was giving her a choice: deny it or share it. She took a slow breath. Yes, she said quietly. I served in the Army, Special Forces. His eyes widened. Delta. She nodded. Delta Force. He whistled softly. I guess that explains the way you moved back there at the fire. I'm sorry you went through that. I'm sorry we didn't realize sooner. We would have secured the area faster. Simone's lips pressed together. She understood the politics of secrecy. Units like hers did not appear on public records easily. It's okay, she said. I never asked for praise. I just want to keep moving forward. Chief Ramirez respected that. He reached out and offered his hand. Simone shook it firmly. If you ever need anything security advice, training, just let me know. After that visit, Simone stepped back into life as a community leader. But now, she carried the weight of her history more openly. When she spoke with neighbors, her tone was the same warm empathy they knew. But in the back of her mind, she thought about patrol patterns, about how to make her streets safer. Word spread quietly through the block that Simone Carter was more than a community worker. Some neighbors whispered to each other, the woman who taught the kids to read was once part of the most elite military unit in the world. A few older residents crossed themselves in surprise. Teenagers gathered on stoops and imagined secret missions in far-off deserts. Even the local news reporter, Carla Jennings, caught wind of it. Carla drove up one afternoon, camera in hand and microphone clipped to her collar. Simone greeted her at the doorstep of the community center. She wore a simple sweater and jeans, her hair pulled back in a neat bun. She offered the reporter a seat on the bright red sofa. Carla spoke fast, as reporters do. Ms. Carter, neighbors are amazed to learn you served in Delta Force. How did you keep that part of your life private? Simone paused, choosing words. Carefully? It's not something I felt I needed to share. I wanted to focus on my work here. But after what happened, I realized people might want to know who was protecting them. Carla nodded, flicking her pen. Do you think the gang that burned your house would have acted differently if they had known? Heat rose in Simone's cheeks. She thought of the hate in those young men's eyes when they set the fire. She did not wish them harm, at least. Not beyond the forces of justice. I think they underestimated me, she said softly. And that gave me a chance to protect my neighbors. The interview aired that evening on the local news. Simone watched from her temporary home, a friend's spare bedroom filled with donated furniture. On the screen, she smiled gently as Carla recounted her story, the quiet community hero who fought for her country and now fought for her neighborhood. Viewers saw footage of firefighters and neighbors painting murals, of Simone leading a line of volunteers carrying buckets of paint. The caption read, Delta Force veteran rebuilds her block after racist arson attack. Calls came in from people wanting to help. A local nonprofit offered funds to rebuild her home. An art collective proposed painting a mural on the charred wall to show unity. Even some of the teenagers who once skipped Simone's self-defense classes asked if they could help with patrols. Simone spent the next days meeting with city officials, nonprofit leaders, and community volunteers. She listened as they discussed budgets and timelines, always bringing the conversation back to the people who lived on the street. What do the families need most? She asked over and over. Some needed childcare, others needed counseling. After the trauma, Simone arranged for a counselor to visit the community center 3 times a week. As plans took shape, Simone allowed herself brief moments of pride. She thought of her parents, who had raised her in a small town in Georgia. They were proud of her when she first enlisted, but they worried when she spoke of special missions. Overseas, they knew what it meant to late nights in planning rooms, the quiet before a raid, the memories that stayed long after. Simone never shared all those memories, but she had brought the skills and the discipline back home. One evening, Simone walked the street alone, under a sky heavy with clouds. Fresh paint on the walls glowed in the lamplight, and a small group of residents practiced self-defense moves on the sidewalk. A teenager kicked at a padded target, and Simone offered a thumbs up. She felt the familiar rush of calm focus, the same feeling she had had before boarding a helicopter in a war zone. Yet here, she used it to teach a young woman how to throw. A punch at the jaw, in case a stranger grabbed her in a dark alley. The next morning, she opened the doors of the community center early for a meeting with the families of the arson survivors. She led them in a circle, asking each person to share one small victory from the week. A mother spoke of sleeping through the night without nightmares. A boy talked about making a new friend at school. Simone nodded with a gentle smile, reminding everyone that healing was not a race, but a steady journey. During the meeting, her phone buzzed with a text from Chief Ramirez. "Gang arrested. Let's talk later." Simone's heart fluttered. The police had gathered enough evidence security footage. Paint samples from graffiti matching the fire accelerant. Eyewitness accounts. They had tracked the main suspects to a nearby abandoned warehouse. The news felt like a weight lifting. After the meeting, Simone stepped outside and dialed Ramirez's number, told her the suspects were in custody, that prosecutors would pursue hate crime charges. Simone whispered thanks and promised to bring coffee to the station the next morning. Then she hung up and breathed deep. She knew justice alone did not heal all wounds. But as she looked at the families leaving the center, smiling cautiously, she felt that something important had shifted. Fear had lost some of its power over them. The gang had tried to crush their spirit with fire, but they had found strength in each other and in Simone's steady guidance. In the afternoon light, Simone stood before the charred remains of her old house with a small group of artists. They sketched a mural design, dark flames transforming into colorful hands reaching out to one another. She traced the vision with her finger. It was a promise. From destruction, unity could bloom. As she walked back to the center, Simone heard laughter behind her. She turned to see children chasing each other on the sidewalk, their games bright. With innocence, she remembered how frightened she had been when the flames first rose. Now, she saw hope burning brighter. That night, she lay in bed reading a book of poetry, her temporary room lit by a soft lamp. She turned the pages slowly, savoring each line. Her thoughts drifted to tomorrow's plans. A neighborhood patrol meeting, a self-defense workshop, a counseling session for those who still felt shaken. There was work to be done, and she felt ready. Before sleep claimed her, Simone whispered into the quiet room, "We are stronger than hate." And she believed it with all her heart. Simone woke before dawn again, her mind restless with plans. The morning air felt cool against her skin as she stepped onto the cracked sidewalk. She drew in a steady breath and looked down the quiet street. After the press coverage in the communities, hard work to rebuild, she thought the danger had passed. But deep inside, she feared the gang might strike again. They had burned her home once, and they might try a second time. She returned to the community center where a small group of volunteers gathered. Their faces were bright with hope, but edged with fear. Simone shared what she had learned from watching the gang's patterns. They often met at the old warehouse on Oak Street. 3 blocks north, she showed them a rough map she had sketched, marking windows, entrances, and possible hiding spots. "I want us to be ready if they come back," she said softly. "We will watch together, and we will act wisely." The volunteers nodded. Mrs. Delgado, the elderly woman whose photographs had almost burned in the fire, clenched her knitting needles. "I'm not scared," she declared. "Not anymore." Simone smiled and placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "It's okay to feel scared," she said. "Fear keeps us alert, but courage helps us move forward." She spent the rest of the morning teaching basic observation skills. She showed how to note the color of a car's license plate, how to remember faces, how to stand quietly in the shadows without being seen. Her voice was calm and firm, the same voice that once guided her team on faraway missions. The volunteers practiced in pairs, whispering descriptions and sketching outlines of strangers on notepads. That afternoon, Simone walked the perimeter of the burned block with 2 teenage girls who had joined the volunteers. They carried flashlights and wore the bright yellow vests she had handed out. Simone pointed to a narrow alley beside the community center. "If anyone slips through here, we need to see them," she said, shining her light down the dark passage. "Remember, you do not confront them alone. You call me or someone else on the team." She handed one girl a small radio clip to her belt. "Keep this on channel 1. If you hear anything suspicious, press this button." The girl's fingers trembled slightly, but she nodded and tucked the radio in place. As the sun dipped low in the sky, Simone felt the familiar tension in her chest. She thought of how she used to wait for night missions, listening to the hum of engines overhead. Now, she waited for an attack on her own ground. But she would not be afraid. Not now. Night fell, and the volunteers took their positions. Simone stationed herself behind a row of parked cars, scanning the street with sharp eyes. The 8 of them were quiet and still, shadows among shadows. At first, there was only the hum of passing cars and the laughter of children playing blocks away. But around midnight, Simone caught a flash of movement near the burned lot. She flicked off her flashlight and leaned close to one of the volunteers. "There," she whispered. 2 figures moved slowly toward the charred remains of her house. She recognized them from the security footage, young men with hoods pulled low. They carried a jerrycan and a bottle of lighter fluid. Simone's heart beat steadily. She had to act quickly. She keyed her radio. "Team, stay calm. 2 suspects approaching the east side of the lot. Do not engage until I give the signal." Down the line of volunteers, lights blinked on their radios. A whisper of acknowledgement came back. Simone slipped forward, keeping low behind a dumpster. She aimed her flashlight toward the suspects. The bright beams startled them. One dropped the jerrycan, and it rolled across the cracked concrete. "Hey," Simone called, her voice steady and loud. "What are you doing?" The men froze, took a step forward, fists clenched. Simone kept her light steady on his face. She spoke in calm but firm tones. "Drop that bottle. Step away." For a tense moment, the world held its breath, and the man reached down, snatched the jerrycan, and hurled it toward the alley. It missed Simone by inches and clanged against a metal door. The 2 suspects turned and ran. Simone did not chase them blindly. She knew from her training that a hasty pursuit could end in disaster. Instead, she flanked them, moving swiftly but silently along the side of the lot. She radioed Chief Ramirez. "This is Carter. I have 2 suspects fleeing toward Oak Street. Backup needed." Within minutes, though, it felt like seconds, she heard the distant rumble of police sirens. The 2 men saw the flashing red and blue lights and skidded to a halt. Simone emerged from the shadows, hands raised. "Stay where you are," she said. "Police are coming." They looked at her as if surprised to see a lone woman blocking their path. One of them muttered a curse under his breath, but he did not move. The sirens drew closer, and soon 2 patrol cars screeched to a stop behind Simone. Officers jumped out, guns holstered but at the ready. "That's them," Simone said, pointing to the suspects. They tried to set fire again. Officers cuffed the men and read them their rights. Simone stayed calm as one officer apologized for the trouble and thanked her for holding them back. She nodded and directed the officers to the evidence: the empty jerrycan, the lighter fluid bottle, and traces of paint matching the graffiti they had sprayed on her mailbox. A young cop approached her. "We'll take it from here, ma'am. You're safe now." Simone watched the suspects being led to the police cars. Despite her relief, she did not feel celebratory. Human lives were on the line, even if those lives belonged to criminals. She walked back to her group of volunteers, who clustered around her with wide eyes and relieved smiles. "You did it," Mrs. Delgado whispered, tears in her eyes. "We did it together," Simone replied, placing a gentle arm around her friend. In the days that followed, the arrested gang members faced formal charges. The community breathed easier knowing the threat had been stopped. Simone continued her patrols, but now she felt less tension in each step. The volunteers had eyes like hawks, radios crackling with updates, and the neighborhood felt safer. Simone also met with the teenagers who helped on the night of the arrest. She praised them for their courage and taught them how to give statements at the police station. They practiced telling the story of what happened, speaking clearly and confidently. Simone reminded them that their words could help keep others safe from hate as the neighborhood moved forward. Simone made one important change. She organized a weekly meeting at the community center called Watch and Support. Each meeting began with simple self-defense training, followed by a discussion circle where neighbors shared news and concerns. Simone always led with a reminder: we stand together so no one stands alone. She invited Chief Ramirez to speak. At one meeting, the firefighters had installed new motion sensor lights around the burned lot, and Ramirez wanted to show neighbors how to use them. He demonstrated the lights, explaining how they worked and how they could deter vandals. The audience listened with rapt attention, nodding as they took notes. Later, Simone reminded everyone of the power in unity. She told the story of what happened the night the gang tried to attack again, that it was not one person, but a group of neighbors who made the difference. She spoke simply: when we watch out for each other, hate loses its power. The months passed, and the scars on the walls of Simone's old house faded under fresh paint. The mural of colorful hands reaching toward each other grew brighter with each brushstroke. Simone stood with a paintbrush in hand, guiding a young boy as he added his own design. His small hands shook, but he pressed on, proud of his work. At the end of the day, Simone wiped paint from her cheek and looked at the mural. Flames of hate had tried to scorch this block, but love and solidarity had risen in their place. The mural was more than paint on bricks. It was a promise that this community would protect itself, no matter what. That night, Simone sat on her front stoop, the sound of children's laughter drifting through the air. She closed her eyes and felt a deep peace. She thought of the gang members in jail, facing justice for their crimes. She thought of her neighbors, once frightened, now vigilant and strong. And she thought of herself, not just Simone, the kind community worker, but Simone, the soldier, the protector, the Delta Force veteran who had come home to guard her own people. She leaned back and stared at the stars. In her service overseas, she had faced dangers in deserts and jungles, but nothing compared to the fierce pride she felt guarding her own block in Chicago. She whispered to the night, "We are safe. We are one." And in that quiet moment, she believed it with all her heart. Simone woke before the sun again, though by now her body no longer felt shocked by the early hour. She rose quietly in the spare bedroom she still called home and slipped on a soft sweater. Today was a special day, the first morning of rebuilding her house, which would soon be called Unity Hall. She walked the short distance to her old lot, where a small crowd had already gathered. Engineers and volunteers milled around stacks of lumber, bags of cement, and pale blue siding panels. A local construction company had donated labor, and neighbors offered whatever they could spare: ladders, tarps, tools, even muffins and coffee to warm the workers. Simone paused at the edge of the street and looked at the scene before her. The blackened ruins she had stared at for so long were now a busy workshop full of life. "Good morning," she called. Her voice carried over the hum of machines. A team member waved back, and the children in the crowd giggled as they chased each other between the wooden frames rising from the ground. Simone felt a surge of hope. Today was not about fire or fear. It was about building something new. She joined the foreman, a tall man named Luis, who handed her a hard hat. "Ready to help?" he asked with a grin. She nodded. He led her inside. "The skeletal frame of the new building. We'll start on the walls today. Your neighbors will help raise these beams. I'll explain as we go." Simone felt as if she had returned to her first day in the army, only this time her mission was kindness. She and a group of volunteers lifted the wooden studs one by one, lining them up in perfect rows. With each beam they set in place, the shape of the room took form. A bright, open space where families could gather, children could learn, and neighbors could share meals. While the workers secured beams with nails and hammers, Simone moved among them, offering cold water and words of thanks. She paused beside Mrs. Delgado, who carefully balanced a plank on her shoulder. "You've got this," Simone said, smiling. The older woman laughed, despite the strain. "I never thought I'd be raising walls, but here I am." By midday, the exterior walls stood high enough to block the wind. Simone surveyed their work and thought ahead to the mural that would cover one side of the building. The mural of hands clasped together in solidarity, painted in bright colors. The wall would remind everyone who passed by that unity could mend even the deepest wounds. After lunch, Simone led a small group inside for a planning meeting. They gathered around a folding table and spread out large sheets of paper covered in sketches and notes. At the top of the most detailed sketch, Unity Hall was written in bold letters. Underneath, bullet points listed the new programs they would offer: free tutoring for children, legal advice clinics, health checkup days, and self-defense classes. Oh, no, looked at each neighbor around the table. Oh, we have to think about what our block needs most, she said softly. What can we offer here that will make life better for all of us? A father named Marcus spoke first. My son still wakes at night, thinking of the fire. Maybe we could have a monthly support group, just a safe place to talk and heal. Simone nodded. That's a great idea. We'll add a healing circle to our list. We can recruit some counselors to lead it. Look at an elderly man. Mr. Lee tapped on the paper. I heard about the man who painted the mural downtown. Maybe he'd help us too. Simone's eyes lit up. Yes, let's reach out to him. And we can have kids help paint smaller sections. Give them a sense of ownership. The meeting ended with clear plans and new energy. As dusk approached, Simone returned outside to check on the construction. The walls were higher now, and the roof trusses waited in neat stacks on the ground. Workers cleaned tools and covered open areas with tarps to keep out the cool night air. Simone stood by the future entrance, imagining families stepping inside for the first time. That evening, Simone hosted a block party to celebrate the day's progress. A long row of folding tables held bowls of salad, trays of sandwiches, plates of fruit, and pitchers of lemonade. Fairy lights hung from makeshift poles, and a portable speaker played soft music. Neighbors came out with blankets, chairs, and folding tables of their own. Children ran through the street laughing and playing tag. Simone took the makeshift stage, a wooden crate at the end of the block, and tapped a spoon on a glass to get everyone's attention. The chatter quieted, and hundreds of voices lowered to a hush. Thank you all for coming, Simone began, her voice steady but warm. Today we built the first walls of Unity Hall. Tomorrow we will build more. But right now, we are building something even stronger. Our community. Applause broke out, and Simone smiled at the faces around her, faces lined with hard work, hope, and pride. She gestured toward the half-finished building behind them. That building will stand here as a symbol of what we can do when we work together. No hate can tear that down. Mrs. Delgado rose from her chair and called out, "Here's to Simone, our leader." The crowd cheered again, and Simone felt tears prick her eyes. She held back the emotion and raised her glass. To our future, she said softly, and everyone joined her in a toast. The party lasted into the night. Simone moved among the clusters of people, sharing stories and laughter. A group of teenagers approached her, shy but excited, and handed her a homemade card decorated with crayons. Inside, they had drawn pictures of the finished Unity Hall, children studying, and neighbors smiling together. Simone folded the card carefully and promised to hang it inside the new building. As the lanterns dimmed and the last guests waved good night, Simone stood alone for a moment on the street, looking at her community's work. She felt a deep sense of satisfaction. They had turned tragedy into action, fear into unity. The next morning, Simone returned to the site with a few volunteers for a quieter task, clearing the debris from the old foundation and leveling the ground for concrete. They worked side by side, moving bricks, rakes, and wheelbarrows full of rubble. Simone guided them on safety, how to lift with knees bent, how to watch each other's backs. Though the work was hard, the group moved in harmony, sharing jokes and encouragement. By afternoon, the ground was ready and the concrete. Trucks arrived. Simone helped smooth the wet cement, inscribing her initials and the date on one corner. July 12, 2025, she said to herself, smiling. The day we laid the roots of Unity Hall. Once the cement set, volunteers began framing the windows and doors. Simone supervised, making sure each opening faced the street, welcoming everyone. She thought about how this building would look in winter, warm and bright inside, offering shelter from the cold. She imagined parents and children filing in for story time, neighbors gathering for game nights, and families celebrating birthdays in this shared space. After the building was fully framed, Simone invited a local carpenter named Rosa to lead a workshop on basic woodworking. Rosa taught neighbors how to build simple benches, shelves, and picture frames. Simone worked alongside her, carefully sanding a small wooden bench for the healing circle room. She thought of Mrs. Delgado's knitting group sitting there, sharing tea and memories. That evening, as Simone walked home, she reflected on how far they had come. In just a week, the husk of her burned house had transformed into a sturdy frame, filled with promise. More than that, trust had grown among neighbors. People who once kept to their own yards now waved at each other, sharing plans and ideas. Simone paused in front of a small garden plot. One of the volunteers had planted rows of marigolds and zinnias along the sidewalk to brighten the area. She knelt and touched the petals, marveling at their bright colors. Even in simple things, beauty could take root. Back in her temporary room, Simone wrote in her journal by lamplight. She sketched the day's progress, a line drawing of the building little people, raising a wall, a heart above the words, "We did this together." She wrote a short note at the bottom. Unity Hall is more than a building. It is proof that hate cannot stand against care. She closed the journal and sat quietly for a moment, listening to the city's murmurs outside the window. She thought of the gang who had tried to destroy her home with fire. They could only watch as hope rose from the ashes. Simone felt no satisfaction in their defeat. Her victory lay in holding her neighbors' hands, one by one, and leading them toward a stronger future. Before sleep claimed her, Simone whispered a promise to the empty lot. "We will finish you soon. And when we do, you will be a place of light, learning, and love." Then she turned off the lamp and let darkness wrap around her, peaceful in the knowledge that each new day brought them closer to completing Unity Hall and closer to healing her community's heart. The morning breeze felt gentle as Simone stepped onto the front porch of Unity Hall. The sun rose slowly, casting golden light on the bright mural of clasped hands painted on the wall. Today was the official opening of the center, and Simone's heart swelled with pride. She remembered how just weeks ago this spot had been a charred pile of rubble. Now it was a place of hope. Neighbors gathered in small groups, greeting each other with smiles and warm waves. Children ran around the yard, their laughter ringing like bells. Someone had set up folding chairs in neat rows facing the entrance, and a long table held plates of fresh fruit, cups of coffee, and pastries. Simone took a deep breath, feeling a flutter of excitement mixed with calm determination. She walked beside Mrs. Delgado, who held a small bouquet of flowers she had picked that morning. "Look at this place," Mrs. Delgado whispered, eyes shining. "We did it, Simone." Simone smiled and patted her shoulder. "We all did it together." Then she noticed Marcus, the father whose son had nightmares after the fire. He knelt beside his boy, helping him adjust a tiny suit. Simone remembered their first support group meeting, where Marcus had shared tears and fears. Now his son stood tall, looking forward to the ribbon-cutting ceremony. When the time came, Simone climbed onto a small platform. She wore a simple dress in sky blue, and her hair was neatly pulled back. Silence fell as everyone turned to watch her. She held a pair of bright red scissors in her hand, and beside her, Chief Ramirez stood with a proud nod. Simone took a moment to look at the faces in the crowd family she had guided. Volunteers who had worked late nights, children who had painted the mural. She felt gratitude warm in her chest. Then she spoke in her clear, gentle voice. "You all for believing in this dream," she began. "Unity Hall is more than bricks and paint. It is a promise that we will always stand together. No matter what challenges come our way, we will face them as one family." Applause broke out, and grew louder until it felt like a wave of sound. Simone lifted the scissors, and with a firm cut, she sliced the ribbon. Colorful streamers fluttered, and a cheer rose from the crowd. The doors opened wide, and children ran inside, their shoes scuffing the new floor. Over the next hour, Simone guided visitors through the rooms. The first room held bookshelves stocked with donated novels and textbooks. Volunteers had built cozy reading nooks by the windows, where soft cushions invited people to sit and read. Simone watched as a young girl curled up with a storybook, her eyes shining. The next room was the healing circle space. Bright rugs covered the floor, and chairs formed a circle around a small table topped with a vase of fresh flowers. Simone had invited a counselor to lead weekly sessions here, and she could imagine neighbors sharing hopes and fears in this safe place. A few volunteers had left comforting notes on the table, encouraging people to speak their truths. Further down the hall, a community kitchen gleamed with stainless steel counters and donated appliances. A group of volunteers stirred pots of soup and grilled sandwiches. Simone inhaled the savory smells and smiled. She thought of how food had brought people together during the fire relief efforts. Here they would cook meals for families in need and host cooking classes to teach healthy recipes. At the end of the hall was the self-defense studio, with padded mats on the floor and mirrors along one wall. Simone had finally found the time to paint the center's emblem. There a small shield with an olive branch across it, symbolizing protection and peace. A schedule on the wall showed weekly classes led by trained volunteers. Simone had taught the first classes herself, and now she would watch others continue her work. As the morning turned into afternoon, school groups arrived for tours. Simone guided them, answering questions with patience. A boy asked how she had kept calm during the fire. A girl wanted to know what Delta Force meant. Simone faced each question simply. "Calm helps you think clearly," she told the boy. To the girl, she said, "Delta Force was part of my dream. To serve and protect people." Children nodded, impressed by her gentle honesty. Later, Simone found a quiet moment in the garden behind Unity Hall. Volunteers had planted new flowers and herbs along the walkway. The earth smelled sweet, and bees buzzed lazily among the blossoms. Simone knelt by a rosebush and touched its soft petals. She thought of how seeds planted in dark soil could still bloom into something beautiful. Her life had taken her through hard places, but each trial had taught her new strength. She heard footsteps and turned to see Chief Ramirez approaching. He carried 2 cups of coffee. "I thought you might need this," he said, handing one to her. Simone accepted it with a grateful nod. "Thank you," she said, lifting the cup. They sipped quietly, the warmth spreading through them, smiled and looked at Unity Hall. "You've created something incredible here. I'm honored to have stood by you." Simone set her cup down. "I couldn't have done it without your team's help, or without this community." They stood together, watching as families moved through the space, exploring rooms, talking, laughing. Simone felt a peace deeper than any she had known. She had found a mission at home as meaningful as any overseas assignment. That evening, Simone returned inside Unity Hall for a final event, a small concert to celebrate the opening. A local jazz band set up on a corner stage, and colored lights glowed softly on the walls. Neighbors filled chairs, holding plates of food and cups of lemonade. Simone took the microphone one more time. "Before we enjoy the music," she said, "I want to thank each of you for the love you have shown. This building stands because we stood together, stands because we chose hope over hate." She paused, her voice catching slightly. "Let's keep building this future, brick by brick, heart by heart." The musician on stage nodded and raised his trumpet. A soft note floated through the hall, and the band joined in. Simone stepped back, her eyes misty, and let the music wash over her. She listened to the melody, feeling gratitude for every person who had lifted a beam, painted a wall, or shared a smile. As the night deepened, children danced between tables. Couples swayed to the music, and neighbors spoke in low voices about plans for next week's book club or art workshop. Simone walked through the crowd, exchanging hugs and handshakes. At one point, Marcus and his son found her. The boy hugged her around the waist and said, "Thank you, Simone. I feel safe now." Nelton hugged him back, her eyes warm. "You're safe because we all care for each other," she said. Finally, when the lights dimmed and the band packed up, Simone found herself alone in the main hall. The chairs sat in tidy rows, and the soft glow of the exit signs cast gentle shadows. She walked to the mural of hands on the wall and reached out to touch the painted fingers. The texture felt smooth, like a promise. She spoke to the empty room. "We did it." We rose from the ashes and built something beautiful. She felt tears in her eyes, but they were not tears of sorrow. They were tears of joy. That night, Suman slept in her own newly furnished room at Unity Hall, a small apartment above the center for its caretaker. She climbed into bed and looked around at the simple furnishings, a small bed, a desk, and a window overlooking the mural. She thought of how this place would serve people for years to come, how dreams would grow here, how friendships would blossom. Before sleep claimed her, she whispered into the quiet room, "This is only the beginning." And she knew in her heart that the story of Unity Hall would continue, shaped by every person who walked through its doors. It was her legacy, a living testament that love and courage could rebuild what hate had tried to destroy. And with that comforting thought, Simone drifted into a deep, peaceful sleep.